Trenbolone and Trestolone might be beneficial when you're a little bit younger. You're single, you don't have to worry about your fertility. Your health is very resilient. When you do a PCT, your natural testosterone production bounces back just like that, which certainly isn't the case as you get older and the longer you use steroids. Vigorous Steve here. Let's pick up where we left off over 6 weeks ago with the Worth It or Not video series discussing various performance-enhancing drugs and whether they're worth taking or not. Just keep in mind that the use of PEDs is always highly contextual. There's a particular reason or goal why you might want to add a compound to your protocol. And with that being said, more often than not, it's the compound selection, the dosage, the administration frequency, and the overall exposure duration, which is going to determine whether you'll reach your goals and how many side effects you're going to experience along the way. Because there's a lowest effective dose where you will still reach your goals. You're not going to experience any side effects or very little side effects, but it's going to take patience because the dose is so low that it's going to take a little bit longer than the manageable dose, where the side effects are already becoming more noticeable. They're manageable, but you're going to reach your goals a little bit faster. And then there's the upper tolerable dose, where the side effects are becoming more prevalent, but still tolerable. You can still mitigate these side effects with ancillaries or particular practices. These are the bodybuilder dosages, the guys that go headfirst into their cycle, right? Because they want to attain their goals as fast as possible, as efficient as possible. And then anything over the tolerable dose, that's basically just increasing the side effects without attaining your goals any faster than you would otherwise with the upper tolerable dose. We got as far as part 1, where we discussed testosterone, boldenone, primobolan, and masterone. And we ran out of time, and then I got a little bit sidelined with podcasts and helping Aaron get set up here in Thailand. But finally we are here. This is part 2. We're going to discuss the other injectable anabolic androgenic steroids, being Trenbolone, Nandrolone, Trestolone, also known as MENT. Before we get into the Trenbolone sandwich, please like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell button while you're at it so you can get notified every time a new video drops. Let's start with Trenbolone, everybody's favorite compound, the nectar of the gods, divorce in a bottle. I think Trenbolone has the most amount of memes and slogans attached to it. It's certainly the most readily used and the most popular of all of the injectable steroids that are available. But I think everybody has a love-hate relationship with Trenbolone because it works like none other. There's nothing like Trenbolone, but the side effects are fucking terrible. So when is it worth it? When is Trenbolone actually worth it? In my opinion, Trenbolone is only worth it in the context of a contest prep. During a contest prep, especially in the beginning of your competitive career, when you don't have so much muscle maturity and density yet, Trenbolone is almost mandatory at any class, right? Maybe not bikini model. We're talking about the bodybuilder classes here. But Trenbolone for men's physique, classic physique, 212 or open bodybuilding, whatever category you compete in, Trenbolone is almost mandatory. And you see that as your competitive career starts to progress and your muscle maturity and density develops during the off season and during consecutive contest preps, that the dose of Trenbolone can actually be lowered. So you might need to use a higher dose of Tren in the beginning of your competitive career. For the first couple of shows, you might run 100 milligrams of Tren acetate per day to simulate muscle density and maturity with a very high dose of Trenbolone. And then as you develop maturity and density over time during the off-season, the Trenbolone dosage can come down. So you see that veteran competitors, they might not even run Trenbolone at all because they have a real muscle maturity and density already, because they've been doing this bodybuilding thing for 10 years, 20 years, or maybe even 30 years, or they run a very low and conservative dose of, let's say, 100, 150, 225 milligrams per week. These are the dosages that they would use during the 90s when Trenbolone was first introduced in the form of parabolan. One ampule contained, 76.5 milligrams Trenbolone hexahydrobenzyl carbonate, parabolan, resulting in 50 milligrams net Trenbolone without the ester attached. And they would inject maybe 1, 2, or 3 ampules per week, resulting in a total dosage of about 50 milligrams to 150 milligrams net Trenbolone per week. In the 90s, that was enough. Nowadays, it's making a comeback. In between the 90s and now, The message boards would tout dosages upwards of 1,400 milligrams Trenbolone acetate per week. Insane, certainly not required. Every veteran competitive bodybuilder will tell you that it was a fun experiment, but the side effects were severely intolerable and it's not worth replicating by anybody else. So I would say that during a contest prep, depending on your level of development, you might need to lower the dose as your development continues and progresses in your competitive career. And you might start off with 700 milligrams Trenbolone acetate per week for your first show, right? Hopefully that's not your first cycle. You already have some experience with other compounds underneath your belt, so you know what to expect from a potent steroid like Trenbolone. So maybe in the beginning it's 100 milligrams per day, 700 milligrams per week. And with consecutive shows, you go from 100 milligrams to 75 milligrams per day, then maybe 50 milligrams per day, then maybe 50 milligrams 3 times per week. And then you might end up a decade into your competitive career with no Trenbolone at all. I've coached several athletes who didn't need Trenbolone anymore because their muscle maturity, their muscle density, and their anger management levels were non-existent, so they didn't even want to run Trenbolone. It was no longer required. So that makes Trenbolone a little bit funky in the context of contest prep, because in the beginning you don't have so much experience, you're certainly younger, you don't have so much anger management in place. So the caveat here is that ideally you're single, because again, Trenbolone is divorce in a bottle, and whether you're in a relationship or actually married, relationships are going to be tough. Now, not everybody suffers from the anger management issues that Trenbolone comes with, but it's certainly something you need to keep into consideration. I couldn't deal with it. That's why my wife asked me to stop 7-8 years ago. So I discontinued the Tren and haven't touched it since. Any dose for me, even the lowest effective dose of, let's say, 100 milligrams per week, would induce severe anger management issues. So I stay clear. Right? Maybe that's not the case for you. Maybe you can tolerate that. Maybe 150 milligrams per week or upwards of 700 milligrams Trenbolone acetate per week is tolerable for you from the anger management perspective. And then, of course, there's night sweats, insomnia, acidic smelling sweat. Man, there's so many side effects that Trenbolone comes along with. That could be a whole separate video series just by itself, which, well, luckily for you, is already on my channel. Now, some people are going to say, I'm going to run Trenbolone regardless of not doing a contest prep, right? I want to run a low dose of Tren during the off season. I want to run Tren just for the hell of it. I want to experiment with Tren. That's entirely your decision, right? It's your body, your responsibility to mitigate those side effects. My advice to you would be do your due diligence researching. Start with the lowest effective dose. That could be as low as 100 milligrams per week. A lot of guys on YouTube are going to say 100 milligrams per week is not going to do anything. And yes, that's true. If you're a gym rat, you don't got your diet, your nutrition, your health supplementation, your blood work, your training, your everything else that you need to do to be a decent bodybuilder in place. Yes, Trenbolone is not going to do anything. Just like with those first-time competitors that need a higher dose, the muscle maturity isn't there. So you need more Tren to simulate the muscle maturity, the strength, and everything else on you to compensate for something that isn't there. And when that is there, when the diet is there, the nutrition is there, the training is there with a couple of years under your belt in the gym, you really don't need so much. So keep that in mind. In this case, the dose really is the poison. I've heard very good responses from people who run 50 milligrams Trenbolone acetate 2 or 3 times per week and have no side effects. And again, these are veteran bodybuilders that can get away with the lowest effective dose of Trenbolone because they have a lot of experience and they get most of their anabolism from their testosterone base and perhaps primobolan or boldenone on top or a combination of both. Then they add Trenbolone at the lowest effective dose for its unique characteristics, its lipolytic effects, its anti-catabolic effects, its tendency to increase IGF-1 sensitivity. There's a lot of unique characteristics making Trenbolone highly beneficial, but you can get those unique benefits at a very low dose, which is not potentiating side effects, making the Trenbolone experience severely miserable, right? The dose is the poison, and Trenbolone is certainly a testament to that. Start low, build your way up, keep a logbook, make sure that you don't exceed the point of no return where you have to discontinue the Trenbolone because the side effects are so severe. And my recommendation to you would be get some experience with testosterone, Primabol, and Boldenone, the compounds which we discussed in the previous video 6 weeks ago. You can always start with the lowest effective dose of, let's say, 100 to 150 milligrams Trenbolone acetate per week. Ramp up the dose if needed if you're not happy with the results on that dose a couple of weeks into your Trenbolone cycle to the manageable dose where the side effects are manageable, but the results are obviously better because the dose is higher. And then decide on your own accord if you want to proceed to the highest tolerable dose. That could be 525 milligrams per week or 75 milligrams per day, 100 milligrams per day. And some guys say that the highest tolerable dose for them is 150 milligrams Trenbolone acetate per day. At that point, I would start to reconsider the potency and the bioavailability of the product that you're using. But again, everybody's different, and that might be the highest tolerable dose for you. With that being said, the evidence for Trenbolone's kidney toxicity is there, and its tendency to raise blood pressure quite dramatically if left unchecked. So you need some ancillaries in place to make sure that your blood pressure stays manageable. The evidence for neurotoxicity is there as well with Trenbolone and its tendency for amyloid plaque buildup, resulting in Alzheimer's disease later on in life. Trenbolone use comes with a big fat manual that you need to read a couple times over before you decide to add it to your contest prep protocol. And if you're a gym rat or a recreational bodybuilder, or you just like to go to the gym, if you fall into any of these categories, you're not a competitor yourself. Even though Trenbolone sounds very exciting and it's all over the news, touted as the next best thing, even though Trenbolone has been around for a minute now, trust me guys, it's not going to be worth it. There are much better alternatives out there. You can use a testosterone base and Primabol or Boldenone on top and maybe add an oral. Will you get similar results? Probably not. Again, there's nothing like Trenbolone, but the side effects are going to be a lot more manageable. So what about the other progestogenic 19-OR testosterone derivative being Nandrolone? Is Nandrolone even worth it? Well, I think it's worth it, but only at lower dosages ranging from about 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams per week. With Nandrolone, just like with Trenbolone for that matter, less is more. And if you go more under Nandrolone, what we say over and over again in the fitness industry, there's a ton of estrogenic side effects which will manifest. And of course, if you get into a state of high estrogen, Nandrolone being a progestogenic compound activating the progesterone receptor, you see that prolactin levels also go sky high. So a lot of side effects are associated with Nandrolone at higher dosages. We have the term DECA, right? Libido issues. Gynecomastia seems to manifest overnight if you go high under Nandrolone and you don't manage your estradiol levels with an aromatase inhibitor or a reversely binding DHT derivatives which inhibits the conversion of testosterone into estradiol, which Nandrolone seems to speed up. Because again, as a quick reminder, Nandrolone is a metabolic intermediate in the aromatase enzyme. When testosterone enters the aromatase enzyme, it converts into Nandrolone before it gets converted into estradiol. And when you take exogenous Nandrolone, this seems to catalyze the conversion of testosterone into estradiol, raising overall serum concentrations. So whereas, let's say before you have a testosterone replacement therapy dose of 150 milligrams testosterone per week, you add in 50 milligrams of Nandrolone, and your estradiol levels might double, even though you only added 50 milligrams of an anabolic androgenic steroid on top of your TRT base. And it's highly person dependent. It depends on your aromatase enzyme expression in your body fat level. So if you have a lot of body fat, Nandrolone is probably not a good idea. And if you have single digits or maybe low double digit, let's say 10 to 12% body fat levels, you don't have so much aromatase enzyme expression, Nandrolone at a lower dose, 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams per week, seems to be reasonably benign, but the added benefit of Nandrolone, its unique characteristics, is that it offers a lot of joint lubrication. Nandrolone promotes water retention, which some guys nowadays like to mitigate with a angiotensin receptor blocker like telmisartan, for example. It will still potentiate joint lubrication to a certain extent, but it might be slightly diminished if you add in the telmisartan. Still, the joint protective effects will be there. Nandrolone won't heal your joints. Its effect on collagen synthesis isn't that dramatic compared to some of the other compounds that we can choose from, like Anavar, for example. That seems to actually heal connective tissue, whereas Nandrolone, it merely masks issues with the joints because Nandrolone increases the synovial fluid, between the cartilage, allowing the joints to move more freely. And Nandrolone also increases systemic water retention, including in the joints and ligaments. So now with this increased water retention and synovial fluid, the joint feels a lot more lubricated. Thus, the pain is significantly less because there's no worn out cartilage scraping against each other. And this is already observed at lower dosages from 50 milligrams per week up to 200 milligrams per week. And more often than not, if you have a decent stack of, let's say, growth hormone, anavar, a testosterone base, and perhaps Primobolan on top to fulfill most of the anabolism, a low dose of Nandrolone will go a very, very long way without experiencing any of these severe estrogenic or hyperprolactinemia related side effects. I do feel that Nandrolone is more of a drug for older guys, mostly because younger guys seem to aromatize more. Now, again, if you're young, you have very low body fat levels, you might be able to get away with a higher dose of Nandrolone without too much use of an aromatase inhibitor. But if you're a higher body fat level and you're a higher aromatizer, and you can easily tell from running testosterone by itself and see at which dose you already need an aromatase inhibitor, and maybe at higher doses of testosterone you need a disproportionate amount of aromatase inhibitor, or you run into an issue where you need a TRT dose of testosterone and the Primobolan, Boldenone, or Masterone that you're running on top is like 5 times higher, and your estradiol is still very, very high, assuming that your Primo, Masterone, or DHB, or Boldenone is legitimate. If you run into an issue that, Nandrolone is certainly not for you because that really promotes the conversion of testosterone into estradiol. But when you're older, your individual aromatase expression has already reduced. Hopefully by the time you've already gone through a couple diets, removing this stubborn baby fat that seems to be highly aromatizing. If you're older, you got some joint issues, you need additional joint lubrication, Nandrolone is highly beneficial. And then there's the Nandrolone only cycle, which might be worth it if you're a testosterone non-responder or any dose of testosterone gives you uncontrollable side effects like acne or severe hair loss, for example, in which case, in these rare instances, Nandrolone only might be a worthy experiment, starting at a dose of 150 milligrams Nandrolone per week, similar to a TRT dose of 150 milligrams testosterone per week. I ran up to 1,000 milligrams Nandrolone solo per week, which was a fun experiment, but I can't say that I got any better results over 1,000 milligrams testosterone per week. With 1,000 milligrams Nandrolone per week, I was using 25 milligrams DHEA and 10 milligrams pregnenolone to somewhat sustain my neurosteroid concentrations. Again, in both cases, that's highly beneficial for these neurosteroids to have a normal balance with your sex hormones. On Nandrolone only, you will see subclinical estradiol levels, and even with DHEA and pregnenolone in the picture, my serum estradiol levels were only 12 picograms per milliliter. Now with testosterone, that converts into estradiol. But if you do Nandrolone only, even with neurosteroid supplementation, serum estradiol levels will be subclinical, and you need estradiol for all its beneficial effects, right? It'll be a whole separate video in itself. There's plenty of information on this YouTube channel about that already. I don't think I would have sufficient estradiol levels if I added in ACG at, let's say, 250 to 500 IUs 3 times per week, or doubled my DHEA and pregnenolone supplementation. I'd probably be still subclinical on my estradiol levels. So if you're going that route, please make absolute sure that you keep your estradiol in range. And otherwise, you might need to supplement a slight microdose of testosterone in, maybe 25 milligrams per week, 50 milligrams per week. Hopefully you can tolerate that alongside of this whopping dose of Nandrolone to somewhat have your serum estradiol in range. There's an issue with left ventricular hypertrophy with Nandrolone. If you run higher dosages of Nandrolone, this will be more pronounced, especially if you need a K-Burgle line to suppress your prolactin levels, which most likely are going to be elevated due to the progestogenic activity that Nandrolone potentiates, especially when serum estradiol levels are high. On Nandrolone only, because estradiol levels are low, generally speaking, you don't see prolactin levels go that high, so you probably don't need K-Burgle line on a Nandrolone only cycle. But if you combine, let's say, 500 milligrams test and anywhere over 200 milligrams Nandrolone, 500 milligrams Nandrolone per week, right? 1,000 milligrams of anabolic androgenic steroids combined. If you don't manage your estradiol and your prolactin levels go sky high, you're probably going to need K-Burgle line, and that's like a recipe for left ventricular hypertrophy. Higher dosages of Nandrolone, in my opinion, are not worth it. But if you have issues with your joints, especially when you're a little bit older, and you know how to manage your serum estradiol levels correctly, Nandrolone at a low and effective dose, 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams, maybe upwards of 200 milligrams Nandrolone per week, are probably going to be worth it. Now, personally, I'm really excited about a compound like Trestolone, but I don't have any personal experience. So from my personal experience, I can't say that Trestolone is worth it or not. I can only go by anecdotal reports. Now, 7 years ago, 7 years ago, when Trestolone was introduced, a lot of people got a bit of an adverse reaction because Trestolone, similar to Nandrolone, seems to promote the conversion of testosterone into estradiol. And even though Trestolone is not bioidentical, there's a lot of progestogenic activity which will occur when you add Trestolone to your stack. Just like with Nandrolone, just like with Trenbolone, with Trestolone, less is more. And that's also because Trestolone is a little bit difficult to source, and when you can source it, it's pretty freaking expensive. So dosages range from the people who enjoy Trestolone, they have a good response, they feel that it's worth it, and it might even be their favorite compound. They no longer use Primobolan, they no longer use Boldenone or dihydroboldenone. MENT Trestolone is their go-to anabolic androgenic steroid of choice with a little bit of a testosterone base, in which case they might run 25 milligrams upwards of 50 milligrams Trestolone per day. So that's, let's say, 175 to 350 milligrams Trestolone per week. I've met an IFB pro who ran upwards of 1,000 milligrams Trestolone per week. He made it to the Olympia stage. He had a phenomenal physique, round, full, dense, hard, all of the good characteristics that you would want out of a steroid. But as of recent, he switched back to the usual test, Primo, Masteron, Trenbolone, and a little bit of injectable Winstrol for his upcoming contest prep. And he said that he liked it slightly better because, again, the Trestolone side effects at that dose were almost unbearable. Going by anecdotal response to Trestolone, it's hit or miss. Just like with dihydroboldenone, which we'll address in a separate video. Trestolone, if you tried it once at a low dose and you like it, it's probably worth it. And if you didn't like it at 25 milligrams per day, because, again, the progestogenic activity is too severe, your prolactin levels go too high, aggression goes up because it does have some characteristics of Trenbolone in that matter, and the estrogen goes too high, right, resulting in maybe some gynecomastia, then it's probably not worth it. So a low and effective trial might be warranted if you do your due diligence researching, because, again, as a quick reminder, Trestolone was developed as a contraceptive. When you look at birth control, including upcoming male birth control pills, there's progestogenic compounds in there. And I think by now it's commonly known that progestogenic 19-nor testosterone derivatives, Trenbolone, Nandrolone, and Trestolone, and some of the orals, which are 19-nor derivatives, are horrible for your fertility. Again, they deactivate the hypothalamic pituitary testis axis not through the androgen receptor by itself, but also through the progesterone receptor. And due to the longer ester formulations and how these progestogenic 19-nor derivatives metabolize from the body, the suppression on the HPTA and overall fertility might last for months. Trestolone, again, it's in Contraceptive, which was never brought to market. It was discontinued during clinical trials. So you have to keep that in mind. If you're aiming for fertility within the next year or so, you want to get your partner pregnant, Trenbolone, Nandrolone, Trestolone, 100% not worth it. And if that's really not an issue for you, you're single, you're young, you can deal with the side effects. Trenbolone and Trestolone might be beneficial when you're a little bit younger. You're single, you don't have to worry about your fertility. Your health is very resilient. When you do a PCT, your natural testosterone production bounces back just like that, which certainly isn't the case as you get older and the longer you use steroids. Maybe Trenbolone and Trestolone might be beneficial for you at low and effective dosages. Unless you're competing, then, well, you're probably going to have to ramp up the dose to be competitive. Whereas when you're older and you're a little bit more settled, you have a partner, fertility is an issue. Again, you want to avoid Nandrolone. Maybe after you have kids and your joints become a little bit squeaky, then Nandrolone is something you can consider. I'll leave it here at the progestogenic 19-nors because, again, we're running out of time. I already made 2 videos about these 3 compounds, comparing them to each other. I'll link those 3 videos at the end of this one. I think I'm going to combine the injectable Winstrol with injectable Trenbolone suspension and injectable testosterone suspension. Then we have 3 compounds which are all water-based. Might as well throw in some injectable Anadrol, which most people should avoid because it's 9 out of 10 times it's in guaiacol, which is highly inflammatory. So I'll leave it here. Stay tuned for part 3 discussing the injectable suspensions and whether those are worth it or not. For now, thank you guys so much for watching. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the description section. It's right between this video and the comment section. And while you're at the comment section, leave me a comment to boost the algorithm. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys. I honestly think that this Gorilla Mode Sigma is kicking in. Well, you guys let me know if I look a little bit more swole than the previous video, where I did a front double bicep being severely androgen deficient and 120 nanograms per deciliter. Man, I feel like I'm up at least to 300. But again, feelings can be deceiving. I'll do blood work at the end of this month. Thank you guys so much. See you in part 3, dropping soon.